Ready, sir.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Javed Anwar. I am the chair of the Committee on Affordability, Accounting and Planning. It's 9:34 a.m. and I would like to call the April 23rd Committee on Affordability, Accounting and Planning meeting to order. This meeting is being held via conference call. Please be aware that although we are meeting via conference call, this meeting is still being broadcast via internet. So at any point, those staff members who are attending in person may be visible to those people watching online. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via conference call and ask them to observe the following etiquettes. Please state your name before you speak. Mute your phone when you're not speaking and keep background noise to minimum. Members will begin with a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond to confirm that you are on the call. Mr. Ricky Raven.
Present.
Sam Torn.
Here.
Donna Williams.
Here.
Welcome Wilson.
Present.
We have got a quorum. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum, please. Agenda item number 2 is consideration of approval of the minutes for December 11, 2019 committee meeting. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes and a second, please?
So moved, Sam Torn.
Second, please.
Second, this is Donna Williams.
Donna Williams, second. So members, please say aye and nay with your names. Ricky Raven.
Aye.
Sam Torn.
Aye.
Donna Williams.
Aye.
Welcome Wilson.
Aye.
Motion passes. And I also say aye, so motion passes. Agenda number 3 is consideration of approval of consent calendar. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that can be approved without comments or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. The consent calendar highlighted in the gray on the agenda. I want to point out our practice of putting most of these rules on the consent calendar, given the extensive weighing process that we go through. However, due to current circumstances, we have placed additional item on the consent calendar for this meeting. Of course, any board members can request that an agenda item can be removed from the consent calendar. This will give us an opportunity to discuss that item or items fully later in a meeting. The following items are on the consent calendar for consideration. Agenda item C, consideration of adopting staff recommendation to the committee relating to the appointments of a student representative to the Financial Aid Advisory Committee. Agenda item D1 through D6 of the proposed rules. Are there any other agenda item that anyone wants to move to or remove from the consent calendar? If there is no further discussion, do I have a motion and a second, please?
Ricky Raven, so moved.
Second, please.
Welcome Wilson, second.
Okay, so I'm going to call the member's name. Ricky Raven, yes.
Yes.
Sam Torn.
Yes.
Donna Williams,
Yes.
Malcolm Wilson,
Yes.
and I'm aye. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4 is a public testimony on the agenda items relating to the Committee on Affordability, Accounting, and Planning. We do not have any registered to testify, so we will move on to the next item. Agenda item 5A is the consideration of adopting the Formula Advisory Committee recommendation to the committee relating to the funding formula for use by the governor and the legislative budget board in making appropriation recommendation to the appropriate legislative committees. Commissioner Harrison Keller will begin the discussion, followed by Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning, who will provide an overview of the formulas and the committee recommendation for each sector. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Anwar. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. As you all will hear from Julie in a moment, the coordinating board's statutorily required to send formula funding recommendations to the Legislative Budget Board and to the governor. The Formula Advisory Committee work began almost immediately following the last legislative session, so the specific charges the committees considered were those that were given to the advisory committees by my predecessor. I want to say that I appreciate the hard work each of these formula advisory committees put into their recommendations that will come before you today. And today we're recommending that the board approve their recommendations so we can satisfy our legislative requirement. Now, I met with the chairs of each of the advisory committees and discussed their work, and each of these committees explored some important issues that need further exploration, as you'll see in Julie's presentation. I think it's important to emphasize that all of this work on higher education formulas should continue to be regarded as work in progress. In particular, unfortunately, the economic outlook is very different today than it was when these committees completed the work in January. And the higher education session that we've all anticipated for 2021 looks like it could be increasingly unlikely. So one important point of context I'd like to make, just for the board's consideration as we open this discussion today and continue to work on formulas, is that in the wake of the Great Recession, the state higher education formula funding was cut substantially. And since then, although the legislature provided multiple increases to higher education funding, it has not yet restored the cuts in the formulas to the pre-2010 level. So, for example, the basis of the general academic institution formulas is still about 10% below what it was in 2010. So those are among the issues that we were hoping to address this next session. And now, of course, we'll continue to need to work on formulas, but we haven't yet in Texas had a higher ed session that's focused on updating the finance formulas and aligning the finance formulas with our goals. Of course, looking ahead to this next session, providing core operating funding will be critical for all sectors of public higher education as we look forward to the economic recovery and to supporting institutions in helping to accelerate the economic recovery. And I look forward to working closely with the board and in partnership with institutions on ways that we can improve our higher education finance system to help make our Texas colleges and universities less susceptible to financial shocks into the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now we will hear from Dr. Eklund.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anwar, Commissioner. Today, I will be presenting the formula funding recommendations of the Formula Advisory Committee. We've sent you a PowerPoint presentation, which is also available online with the meeting materials. but because of the format of the call, I'm going to walk you through the recommendations using slide 2 of the PowerPoint. This slide lays out the high-level recommendations for each of the higher education sectors that receive formula funding, including the community college districts, Lamar State colleges, the Texas State Technical Colleges, and the general academic institutions, which are our public universities, and also our health-related institutions. Before I lay out the committee's recommendations, I'll provide a brief overview of formula funding and the funding process for our newer board members. Texas law requires the coordinating board to provide recommendations to the legislature and governor on funding levels and the formulas that allocate them for higher education institutions. To develop these recommendations, we get input from the higher education institutions, and this process starts the summer after a legislative session and ends with the formation of 3 formula advisory committees composed of institutional representatives. The formula advisory committees, or FACs, were given charges last August from, as the commissioner mentioned, from former Commissioner Paredes, and then they convened throughout the fall of 2019. The chairs of the committees met with Commissioner Keller this past February to present their recommendations, and they're listening in on the call today. It's important to note that these recommendations were finalized in January, and as you heard previously, they're coming to you now when we're in a very different economic environment. The recommendations the board adopts must be forwarded to the Legislative Budget Board and Governor's Office by June 1st of this year. So the next step is that this fall and next spring, when the legislature meets, the coordinating board staff will provide updated data sets needed for the formula run to the Legislative Budget Board. The legislature then ultimately sets the funding levels and passes an Appropriations Act that provides state funding for higher ed institutions for the upcoming biennium, which is going to be the 22-23 biennium. So as you just heard, the commissioner recommends that the CAAP committee accept the recommendations of each of the formula advisory committees for the 5 sectors that you see here on slide 2. For the 22-23 biennium, the committees recommend formula funding rates rather than specific funding levels. At the recommended rates and using projected enrollment data, these recommendations would generate a total overall funding increase of $1.3 billion or 14.1%. These funding levels will change when institutions submit actual enrollment data for the base period. So now let me move to the specifics, and I'll start with the community colleges. Overall, the recommendations for the community colleges result in an approximately $200 million or 11% increase in funding. The allocation of community college formula funding is primarily based on contact hours. The 2-year college FAC recommends increasing those rates by 7% in terms of the average rate per contact hour. Additionally, each community college district receives a minimum amount of funds called core funding. For the upcoming biennium, the committee recommends increasing core funding to $2 million per district, up from $1.4 million. And now I want to talk about community college success point funding, which is a type of performance or outcomes-based funding. For each student milestone completed in an academic year, the institution receives points towards the outcomes-based formula. The Formula Advisory Committee recommends a funding rate of $215 per point, a 6% increase of what was funded for the current biennium. They also recommend that the metrics stay the same for success points, but that the weighting or amounts earned per point be adjusted for some of the metrics to account for certain populations, such as dual credit students and students who are academically or economically disadvantaged. Finally, the FAC recommends a process of adding and removing critical or targeted fields that are academic or technical fields for which there's a workforce need and which pay above the median wage. There has always been a point bump for these critical fields, but not an active process to add or remove them. Thus, the recommendation is for an official committee review process to do that. Now I'm going to move on to funding for the state colleges. The 2-year Formula Advisory Committee recommendations result in a $6 million or 9.2% funding increase for these schools. Recommendations include an increase for inflation to their formula rate. The majority of the state colleges' funds are allocated using contact hours, similar to the community colleges. A smaller portion is allocated using the college's predicted square feet and a space support formula rate that's also used for the public universities. In addition, state colleges under a certain headcount receive a small institution supplement. The recommendation includes continuing using the methodology from the current biennium, which increases the amount previously received by the state colleges. Next up the state technical colleges, or TSTC. Their funding is allocated primarily using the college's return value formula. This formula is generally based on several years of student wages after they complete a program or set number of hours at a TSTC institution compared to the minimum wage. Details of how the calculation works are provided in your materials. The FAC recommendation is to keep the percentage funded of the return value formula at 36%, the level the institutions received in the current biennium. A small part of TSTC funding is provided for dual credit courses based on contact hours, for infrastructure based on predicted square feet, and through a small institution supplement. The dual credit and space support recommendation includes a small adjustment for inflation. Overall, the recommendations result in a relatively flat level of funding for the TSTCs from the current biennium, as you can see on this slide. And now I'll discuss funding for the public universities or general academic institutions, and we refer to these as our GAIs. The current formulas for universities are primarily enrollment-driven, with most funding allocated through the instruction and operation formula, which is based on weighted semester credit hours. Additionally, general academics receive space support and a small institution supplement. The GAI committee recommends an increase for inflation in the formula rate and for the small institution supplement. These inflation-based rate increases and projected growth in the formula drivers result in an increase in funding of approximately $300 million, or 6.2%. The general academic institution recommendations also incorporate a new graduation bonus formula to increase the number of at-risk students who graduate, and this would be funded using the remaining funds in the Beyond Time account, about $25 million. And now we'll move on to our last sector. The health-related institutions are funded through 5 types of formula. They are primarily funded through full-time student equivalencies, or headcount, for instruction and operations, and also receive space support and have a research enhancement formula. Additionally, HRIs receive funding for graduate medical education, or GME. Certain health-related institutions also receive mission-specific funding. The Health-Related Institution Committee is recommending a return to the 2000-2001 rates from when these HRI formulas were first used. These rates are for instruction and operation, infrastructure, and research. In addition, they are recommending an increase to the GME rate. The recommendations for increased rates for the HRIs result in an increase in funding of about $750 million, or 37% across the formula. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Members, is there any question you'd like to ask Dr. Julie Eklund, our Commissioner of Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board?
Mr. Anwar?
Yes.
Chairman Anwar, this is Fred Farias.
Yes.
I was wondering if Commissioner Keller and/or Dr. Eklund could review for. I know the current members are very seasoned legislative folks, but there's people on the internet that are watching or listening online, and also some of the newer board members. If you could, Commissioner Keller or Dr. Eklund, give us a little background in the Legislative Budget Board, because I know that the current Texas House of Representatives, the Speaker, has made some changes, in fact, this week on the board.
Julie, do you want to walk through the standard processes, and then I can weigh in more generally?
Yes. So as I mentioned in my presentation, we do send information about our student enrollments, and in terms of our rate recommendations over to the Legislative Budget Board. We first send them in October, and then we send updated enrollment and funding information to them, again, based on our base year enrollment counts. We send additional information to them April 1st, so updated information, and then they use that information to provide materials to the legislature. And I'll let the commissioner speak in terms of any changes there.
Thank you, Julie. So, Dr. Farias, I think just because of the uncertainty around what the revenue estimates might look like, so one of the issues that's come up recently that the Speaker had weighed in on publicly is whether agencies should, in the current budget, need to give back a portion of their funding, and there's still discussion among the legislative leadership and about the governor and with the governor's office about what they might need to do in different scenarios. Expect in July some updated information from the comptroller, and we'll be able to report back to the board at the next board meeting about where those discussions stand. So there's two issues. There are two issues we're going to need to monitor closely, and of course we're in close communication with the legislative leadership and with the governor's office on. The first one will be what we're doing in the current biennium, where it is possible that there could be a clawback that could be 5% or more, depending on the state's situation overall. And then there's the ongoing conversations looking ahead to what we might anticipate for the next biennium. And again, I think it's important for us to not assume that because there may not be funding available for a major infusion of funding into the higher ed formulas, that doesn't mean that we don't need to work on the formulas across all the sectors. I think it may be even more important that we try to focus on how to make those formulas more resilient and better aligned with the uncontrollable costs and the missions of the institutions, and better alignment with the state's higher education goals. So that's work in progress that we definitely need to work on closely with the board and in close partnership with the institutions.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Dr. Eklund.
I've got a question either for Commissioner or Dr. Eklund. Because of the economic uncertainty, all these increases in different aspects, you know, I have you talked to the legislator or the governor? Is he going to use rainy day funds to make up some difference, or what's the feeling on the state legislator and governor's office?
So at this point, I don't know what the decisions might be about the rainy day fund or recommendations for tapping the rainy day fund in the next session. I think the main focus right now is trying to get a sense of what's the depth of the impact on the Texas economy, and so this next revenue estimate will be very important for informing all those conversations for the current biennium and for the next biennium. So I think right now the focus is really on understanding where we are and what's happening with the revenue estimate.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was just curious about, you know, if you had any conversations with the chief of staff or governor or anybody. Anyway, is there any other further discussion? Hello? Yes. Somebody wants to have a question? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the Formula Advisory Committee recommendation to the committee relating to the funding formulas for use by the governor and the legislative budget board in making appropriation recommendation to the appropriate legislative committees?
So moved, Sam Torn.
Ricky Raven, second.
Who is that? Who seconded?
Ricky Raven.
Okay, Ricky. So please call your name. Who is against, for it, a yay or nay? Ricky Raven, yes. Sam Torn, yes. Donna Williams?
Yes.
How about Welcome, Wilson.
Yes.
And I'm for it, so motion passes. Then we move to agenda item 5B. Consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the committee relating to the annual report about the financial condition of the state's community college district, HB 186, Texas Legislature Regular Session, Rider 12, 3-219. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning, will be available to answer any question. Is there any question, please? If there is no further question, do I have a motion to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the annual report about the financial condition of the state's community college district? Do I have a motion and a second, please?
Ricky Reagan, so moved.
Donna Williams, second.
Okay. Sam Torn, please, and welcome, Wilson, please.
Sam Torrance, yes.
Welcome, Wilson, yes.
And I say yes, so the motion is approved. Agenda number 5C was approved on the consent calendar. Agenda number 5D, 1 and through 6 are proposed rules were approved on the consent calendar. Agenda item number 6 is adjournment. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved, Sam Torrance.
Ricky Reagan, second.
Okay. Donna Williams and welcome, Wilson, please.
Donna Williams, yes.
Welcome, Wilson, yes.
And I say yes, so the motion passes. We will now take a short break to allow the staff to set up for the quarterly board meeting, which will begin in approximately 5 minutes. Member, please remain on the conference call. Thank you.